Hello everybody, Pinstripe here. What is going on? Welcome back to some more Hogs of War here on Mission 20 Achilles Heel, where we face up against an entire team that is solely made out of surgeons. Now that is both good and bad. Good because it makes this mission longer, so we have more stuff to talk about, but bad because, well, it takes a long time. There is a lot of waiting involved, and primarily because of the reasons that we've discussed before. Hogs of War doesn't really give the player any real sort of heads up as to what is to happen in any given mission. You kind of have to rely on the brief synopsis / info of the mission overview while the game is loading before the mission loads in. But even then, that doesn't tell you exactly what's going to happen at any given point. So with this mission, you have to wait for the medals to drop. Now it takes roughly about 8 to 9 minutes before they actually drop down and you can collect them. And when you've done that, that's when you end up taking out the rest of the surgeons, because you start off by facing against these 4 dudes right here, and then later on another reinforcement of 4 surgeons also drop down. So with having no clear objective as to how to gain those medals, or to even know that there are any medals in the first place, a lot of players will end up just prematurely taking out all these surgeons and moving on. So that's usually what I do half the time, because I am incredibly impatient. I don't like waiting. But going back to my previous point, this mission is just different. I like it. I like using one particular class and having an entire team of them, because surgeons are unique in the fact that obviously they are the only pig that can, heal multiple pigs at any given time. They are the main healer of any given team, so it does change it up a little bit. Surgeons are of course armed with tranquilizers and rifles and grenades, but their main ability is to constantly reheal their teammates. And that is, at the core of this mission, is that it doesn't matter how much damage you can do, these surgeons will usually turn around and prioritize healing over anything else. They don't usually prioritize damage, so until their teammate drops below, I think it's like 50 health, that's when they'll turn around and be like, okay, let me heal you, and not focus on the battle too much. So it's just a constant repetitive process of, okay, let's try and whittle down their health as much as possible, and then just try and distract them from healing each other. And what I try and do is whittle down their health to the point where it's not quite low enough for them to heal themselves, but it's at a stable point where I can then utilize the airstrike, which I do later on, to take out a bunch of enemies. Because with the reinforcements dropping down, obviously they have the full 120 health, and that is just a pain in the ass to deal with, especially if you are running low on ammunition. As you can see, I'm prioritizing the bazooka as well, because that does the stable 40 maximum damage, and I want to save my cluster bombs and my airburst for later on. So combine that as well with the airstrike, and there is just tons of damage to be had. Now the layout of this map is also different. You have the combination of low and high ground. For once we are on the high ground, not starting off at the bottom of the map and making our way back up. As many of you will remember, I made a video on the unused map known as Babel, which I believe to be the older version of this map, which is completely flipped. So the player would start off where the surgeons are right now, and you would try and make your way up the hill, and the enemy was on the top. But that was completely different because the overall feel was a little bit different. It was at night time. And it was incredibly difficult for the player to really get anywhere unless they had a jetpack. And the enemies you were facing up against were gunners, I believe. So things have changed a lot since then, but overall the initial shape of the map hasn't really changed too much. And as I said, the height difference between where the player starts and where the enemy starts is different, and I like it. It's nice that the enemy actually starts on the low ground for once, and they have to try and move around, reposition themselves, and try and deal damage with what limited weapons they have, because the grenade and the standard rifle are very reminiscent of the early Grunt, except for the fact that these surgeons can obviously heal themselves and have 120 health. The main thing the player really has to look out for is the tranquilizer, because, you can lose your turn. It only does 20 damage, but that is countered by the fact that, as I said, the surgeons don't really have the capability of destroying an entire team with just grenades. There are enough of them, so they do have strength in numbers, being able to heal themselves and take out a single player if they're in their vicinity, I suppose. Because if you plonk a single commando in front of 4 surgeons, then you're going to be in for a little bit of a shock, because they can just gang up on you, use all their grenades, and deal a hefty chunk of damage. It may not kill you, because you may retreat and stuff, and you do have a lot stronger weapons than they do, but it is just something to keep in mind and not to try and do everything alone, I suppose. I do keep my hero at the back of the map. I just keep him on the high ground because he doesn't necessarily have to get involved. He's got the airstrike, and I mainly use him to collect the medals, and then I send off my other paratroopers to go ahead. Did I say paratroopers? I meant commandos. I send off my commandos to go ahead and do the dirty work and deal most of the damage. I mean, come on, it looks very similar to the paratrooper. That's why I got confused, or just muddled up my words. But as I said, this mission is longer than usual because we are just waiting for those reinforcements to drop in about 2 minutes time, and that is essentially me just waiting for my moment to pounce. So when they drop down, I can just rain hell down on them, take out at least 2 of them, and then clean up with the commandos. And obviously, you want to take out the medical tent in the far corner of the map to prevent them from jumping in and healing themselves, because medical tents and mash tents can heal players up to a certain amount. I think the medical tents can do, I don't know, it differs on different maps, but I'm pretty sure the medical tents can only heal 50, and the mash tents can heal like full health, and obviously they differ in colour. So the medical tents are the green ones and the mash tents are the brown ones, I think. I need to do more research into that one. So yeah, you've got to destroy that mash tent in order to stop the enemy team from healing themselves even more, because as soon as their health drops to below 10 or like below 15, then they will usually limp over to the mash tent and try and take a turn to heal themselves back up again to full health. But usually that is a little bit weird, because the majority of the time the match goes on for, as I said, a long time. So by that point they would have usually run out of grenades, and if you're not face to face with them, if they're not within like rifle range, then the majority of them will skip their turn, and then that results in additional supplies being dropped down and gifted to them, usually a bazooka, and that's when things just completely change. I've discussed that before, just how lengthy matches can go on, and if enemy players run out of weaponry that can deal long-term damage or deal damage from a long distance, if they run out of weapons, then they will usually be gifted an infinite bazooka, which can completely change up any given game, especially if it is a pig that has more health or is just of a higher class. It can change things up dramatically. Back to the gameplay then, and as you can see, it is airstrike time, baby, dealing all that damage and destroying the mass unit in the process. But obviously, as I said, that isn't actually an objective, but it's just handy to do it anyway. And by doing so, the enemy is in a fairly bad way, and when they heal up themselves, it kind of gives you the opportunity to home in and start moving your troops forward, because by doing so, they're prioritizing healing, you're prioritizing damage, and usually damage comes out as being the winner, because I've obviously saved my cluster bombs, I've saved my airburst, and they can only dish out a maximum of 40 damage because they can't use the healing hands. They can only really use the medical balls and the medical darts. But alongside my own weaponry, I've also got the ability of picking up some heavy explosives or high explosives and dishing out a maximum of 60 damage per explosion, which obviously if you throw it into a crowd of dudes is going to do a huge amount of damage. And again, that will make the surgeons prioritize healing over actually dealing damage, unless they decide to use their tranquilizer, which they do later on, which is annoying. But again, that then requires me to turn around and be like, okay, well, do I want to heal my pig or do I want to make him skip his turn? Because again, it's only 20 damage, and when you've got a team that has a maximum of 150 health per pig, I mean, you're usually going to be at the rank of commando or hero, so between 130 and 150, it's not going to be too much of a problem. And going back to my original point, is that this mission is just much easier in comparison to ones that we've faced up against before. When you think of the missions that are upcoming with Hero Warship, Assassination, they're a lot more complex, but this one is kind of a respite, and it's the same in hard mode as well. You still face up against 4 surgeons. There isn't an upgrade to commandos, which I think would be a little bit much, because that takes the focus away from the theme of healing, I guess, and having that mash tent. I know that commandos can heal themselves, but they can't do as much as surgeons can. I think it's a shame that they're not able to use the healing hands. They were in the older version. I think in the beta of the game, there were enemy AI surgeons and medics that were able to use the healing hands on their teammates. I will show that in future when I do focus on this character, either in one of my bootcamp videos or something. But overall, yeah, I just find this mission to be kind of a respite considering what you faced up against in the other missions that you were taking on before this one. Now, dotted around the map within the enemy's reach are 3 individual homing missiles, which when you think about weaponry isn't actually that strong, considering it only does a maximum of 40 damage. And again, because at this point in the campaign you would have commandos and heroes, you can, gain back that damage that has been taken upon you. So finally the medals start to drop down and I can reposition my pigs accordingly. As you can see, I've been taking things very casually because overall I know that I have the advantage in terms of weaponry, in terms of positioning and overall strategy, because I knew exactly what I was doing and when. I knew when to move my pigs forward, I knew when I was going to pounce and when to just hold off and wait. There is just that long period of waiting for both the reinforcements to come in and for the medals to drop, that you don't have to take things too seriously. Again, when the enemy is limited in terms of weaponry, then why should you go out of your way to, go full tryhard and deal as much damage as possible to then have it, heal back up again? Because when you count the amount of surgeons and the amount of utility that they have with their medical balls, their medical darts, they're going to just constantly reheal. That's all they're going to do. So that's when you need to get closer and change things up again. But that's only when the MASH unit has been destroyed and when the medals start to drop, because any point before then is just going to be, or it's going to at least feel like a waste of time. So now that we're up close, that's when they can utilize their grenades, but that's where you then have to keep an eye on just healing. And it's going to be a bit more challenging when it does come to hard mode, but again, not as challenging as other missions that we've had before. But it just seems to be a common theme in this game that the final mission of each island is different. As an example, you had the protection of the general's wine. Like that mission in itself is still tricky because you've got to dodge the destruction of the barrels. You don't want to destroy the 2 barrels that are closest to where his wine cellar is. So there's just little bits and pieces, little missions here and there that are just a bit odd. This one is not as odd, but it is different, and I like that, I have to say. But what do you think about this mission? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know. But overall, that is pretty much going to wrap everything up. The final medal is going to drop in a second, and I'm just going to finish up cleaning up these dudes and carrying on with everything else. In terms of future videos, obviously we're drawing to a close with this campaign for the PC version, but that's when after we've completed this campaign, we're going to move to the PS1 version and do hard mode, which I intend to do as live commentaries, because post commentaries are great, but I find that I have more freedom with doing some live commentaries, and it makes it a bit more engaging because you can see my thought process as I'm doing it, I guess, whereas post commentary I can put more analysis into it, but that doesn't necessarily make it more engaging. But let me know your thoughts on that as well, because all the input you guys can give is very much appreciated. And there is, of course, a lot more stuff coming up as well. I've got another tutorial for accessing additional classes. I've got another bootcamp video coming up, and a bunch of other new things that I'm going to be starting as well, including a mission overview series and a player character profile series as well, where I go through each individual character on each individual team and talk about them in detail. So plenty to come, and I hope you can all stick around and check out everything as it comes out. So in the meantime, that is going to wrap everything up. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts. Let's get a discussion going, and I will catch you guys later for the next one.